One more time. Can
This,
you say your name? One more, I'm sorry.
sure,
Can
I
you say
will
your
do.
name, title of the poem, and
No
start the poem one
problem.
more time?
No problem at all. Eric Paul Shaffer, How I Lost My Library Card. This kid at the library was reading aloud to himself in the corner, and some old man reading the sports page, wasting time on men who play with balls for money, told the kid to shut up. A library, he said, was supposed to be quiet. So be quiet, for God's sake. And of course, in his mind, there was no doubt about who God was. When I saw the poor kid's surprise, his embarrassment, his shame, I finally spoke. I said, "Man, you shut up. Look, you grumpy fool. What we have here is a kid reading. He's reading. These days, that's a goddamn miracle. 13 hungry homeless people live on the library lawn, and you're upset because he's reading aloud? Listen, you dumb bastard. Silent reading is for the dead. Are you hearing me? His lips are moving because those words are alive. He's speaking aloud because what those words need to revive them is his breath. He's using his voice because all that story needs to be heard is his voice. So I have an idea. Toss the newspaper in the trash and go play some damn basketball instead of sitting on your flabby ass gazing at numbers about games you never saw. And while you're at it, find this poor kid a chair, get him a platform, a podium, a pulpit, put him on a pedestal to shout from his book in the strongest voice he can raise, and ask him, no, beg him to read to you, to me, to the library staff, to the patrons, to the 13 ravaged souls on the street, and to the rest of this vast, distracted nation. Let him read his book to us all and make us all one people for once, concerned about what really matters. Let his voice lead us through a story we need to hear. Let him read. Just let him read.
And thank you so much. I actually want to say that I did love that poem. One thing I've been trying to do, like I was living in Asia for 16 years before I moved back to America in 2025. I was teaching English. So I got very used to being around students who were always reading. They have a very heavy workload. I was in Korea and Taiwan. And I come back here and I'm mostly around adults actually. And I'm surprised how few people read, particularly writers. I'm surprised how few writers read. So actually, I
Yeah.
really did enjoy the message of this poem. I've been trying so hard to get more people to read through different methods. But actually, I feel like the introduction was probably missed when I introduced you. So I'll do that at the end. But let's just
Okay.
get to the questions, actually. So my
All right.
first question, which may be considered unfair, because I asked this of all the poets, but not the fiction writers, but I'll do it anyway. Why do you write poetry?
I think I've been writing poems for so long that I've forgotten why I started. I mean, I was 12, 13, 14, which was over 60 years ago. And I guess the flame was probably ignited by three sparks: young love, young angst, and deep admiration of the poets I read in school. My teacher in I guess it was the ninth grade, Mr. Brown, introduced us to poems that just knocked me for a loop. He read to us number 15 from Lawrence Ferlinghetti's Coney Island of the Mind, which is one of the most amazing collections of poems I've ever read. But this is the one that starts constantly risking absurdity, the poet, blah, 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 right? So look it up, number 15 in that sequence. Just wonderful, amazing stuff. And I remember thinking to myself, wow, you can do this? I can do this? I'm doing this. So that's pretty much why I really started to focus on trying to write poems and write the lines that were coming to me down.
Okay, and then the second question is for these particular poems in SAMJOKO magazine, what are these poems about?
Okay, so the first one I think is adding a page to the pop-up book of nightmares. Many years ago, I worked at Borders on Maui for a while after I got back to the United States. Like you, I lived in Asia for a while, but I lived on Okinawa in Japan for about 8 years. And when I came back, I didn't have a teaching job, so I worked at Borders. And one of the many books that I found in there when I was wandering about was called The Pop-Up Book of Nightmares. You open it up and things just rise off the page, that kind of book. And there were 10 really interesting nightmares illustrated, like falling, having a car accident, drowning, all these ones. And the one that wasn't listed there was one that I constantly find myself encountering, and that is when I fall asleep at night, whoever I am, whoever this is right here, completely disappears. And the person I am in my dreams is always somebody I have no idea who they are, don't recognize them at all. Can be a woman, can be a man, can be a kid. In one case, I was a patch of lichen on a stone, watching the sun roll by really fast because, time goes faster when you're lichen, apparently. But all these weird things. And so when I wake up, I feel just like, I think the name of the Chinese poet was Zhuangzi, who asked one time, am I a butterfly dreaming I'm a man or a man dreaming I'm a butterfly? And I was particularly focused on, in my poem, whose life was the actual life? Was it the one that I'm having right now? Or was it the many lives that I'm living when I'm asleep? So that was what that one's about. How I Lost My Library Card is based, oddly enough, on a real situation. I was in the Kahului Public Library on Maui, and there was this grumpy old man giving this kid a hard time. And I just said, leave him alone, basically. But then I thought, I should really make a speech out of this. I should make it a position paper, basically, and get that out there. And it's been a poem that's been quite popular with my reading audience. So I'm really, really happy with that one. So I think the kid was gratified that I spoke up for him, and that's part of the impulse to have written it down. And finally, Redemption is a poem about going to visit inmates at Oʻahu Correctional Center or Community Correctional Center here on the island, because I was listening to a couple of my students talk about doing that for a sociology course, like they were going to do it and they're going to write a report on it. And I was thinking, like, what would this be like if I did that? So the poem comes out of the imagined experience of going to that place. But I did often visit the can and bottle redemption center, which was right across the street from it. And often the people working there would be previously released from the prison across the street. So it was quite an interesting thing to talk to those guys and women who were working at the place. So basically, a lot of it came from interacting with them and from wondering what it would be like to do such a thing.
And actually, before I move on to question number three, I'm just curious, what is your process of writing poetry? Like, do you start off with pencil and paper first? Do you go straight to some type of device like a phone, tablet? What's your process of actually putting the words down on the page or writing poetry?
Okay, my two major ways are I try to do a run or a walk every afternoon. So I'm usually trying to spin out some lines, like I'm saying in my head and often out loud, things to see how they sound, because poems are sound. If they don't sound good, they ain't good, right? So I want to try it out on my tongue and through my ear. And a lot of the times those lines start to add up and they start to get connected to each other. And then I'll get an idea to how to draw them all together in one statement. And by the time I get home, I've got I don't know, 100 words that I need to scribble down really fast on a piece of paper. And then later, probably the next day when I get up, I type that into the computer and then start really revising it, moving things around. My other method is that I meet with at least two companions, my friend Melanie, who's been working with me since 2008, and I get together every Monday for about an hour. And basically, we talk for 5 minutes and try to come up with a prompt, something to write about. And then we go for 55 minutes, read what we got, and then for the rest of the week, we revise that on our own. And my other friend Jordan, I do the same with on the next day. Melody on Monday, Jordan on Tuesday. And the rest of the week is usually revisions and compositions on my own. And I also write fiction and nonfiction. So that's what I work on those days.
Okay. And this next question is again, it's very general. And I kind of mean it more for younger people because it's a question I get asked sometimes in interviews. What advice would I give myself to a younger version of myself as a writer? And one thing the advice I would give is to write poetry. I wish I had started writing poetry more when I was like in elementary, middle, and high school, but I didn't. And so, what tip would you give on writing poetry? Kind of thinking about for younger people. It could be for anyone really, but maybe for younger people, a person. What tip would you give on writing poetry?
Huh. Okay. If you're a younger person and you think you want to write poems, perhaps the best piece of advice I can say is try to poke your eye out. And what I mean by that is the narrator, is always an I, right? Try writing it from a third person or try imagining it from the situation or like who's in the event and write it as a kind of a narrative that has a point like a poem has. Because when I was younger, I constantly fell into the hole of talking about myself instead of talking about a poem, right? Or trying to make a poem. So if you poke your eye out, you move immediately away from that egocentric self and try to say stuff that's going to matter to other people as much as it matters to you.
That's good. Actually, it took me a moment to realize what you were actually saying to poke your eye out. I was like thinking, what? But okay. All right. And once again, I started doing these interview series and I was working in Korea teaching people who were elementary, middle, and high school students. And it doesn't come up often. Poetry does not come up often for teaching. But when it did, the kids hated it. And one of the reasons why they hate it is because they get to first line into it, they don't understand anything that's going on because it's just much more different than just reading like an essay or a poem or or an essay or a story. And so my next question is, what tip would you give on how to read poetry? Reading means to understand a poem.
So a tip on how to read a poem.
Yeah, reading means to understand the poem.
Okay. Uh, my advice to everybody is read the poem aloud, always. First, second, and third. Read it out loud because once you put it on your tongue and feel it in your ears, it has a body. You embody it, right? You become that poem by speaking it. If you have the distance between like you and the page, then you can stand back and go, I don't get this. But when it's you, when you're embodying the poem, you're more likely to understand it. And also, to myself and to other young readers, I would say, um, don't worry if you don't get a poem. Toss it and move on to another poem because maybe that poem is for you later in life, or maybe it's just not a good poem, right? So read stuff that actually is accessible to you. And for that, you'd probably want to go to people like, the people I read were Lawrence Ferlinghetti, Lou Welch, Gary Snyder, Philip Whalen, Jack Kerouac, um, who else? Jack Spicer, just people who write about everyday life in everyday language, because that's the way most of us get into it, trying to make our everyday language really literary and especially significant and has a message to yourself and to other people. So read it out loud.
Okay, and actually, that's going to probably go into the last question. Can you mention a poem or poet that you feel is exemplary, and then why?
Okay, well, I did most of my study on Lew Welch, Lewwelch. His book is called Ring of Bone, and his poems are miraculously clear. For instance, he wrote, I saw myself a ring of bone in the clear stream of all of it, and vowed always to be open to it so that all of it might flow through. And then I heard ring of bone, where ring is what a bell does. Now, that poem absolutely shattered my skull when I first read it. It was like puns and clear statements and an actual situation I could put myself in and understand. It was just a wonder to me. And Welch does that all the way through his book, Ring of Bone, and writes some of the best ecological and environmental poems you will ever read. He's famous for his poem called Song of the Turkey Buzzard, which is about how the buzzard is his, what'd you call it, spirit animal, totem, whatever. He does a miraculous job of connecting himself and that bird in a way that I find still amazing. For a while, I lived in California, so I was studying at University of California at Davis. So I would see the turkey vultures up in the sky all the time. So when I read that poem, everything he says in there is exactly accurate to what turkey buzzards actually do. And that's remarkable because, poets and fiction writers for the world over just make stuff up sometimes, but it's harder and more elegant to make a poem out of what's really there, what accurately you see, than it is to just make stuff up. So I'm amazed by people who make poetry from the world that surrounds us and the planet that's is ours. That just amazes me.
And thank you so much. And actually, they keep changing apps and updating them. So I didn't realize that the person at the button they make a record. But I want to do this one more time. I want to
Okay.
introduce you. And then, so I am Todd Sullivan. It was SAMJOKO magazine. This is Eric Paul Shaffer, who was published in the summer issue 5, 2026. He's an author of 10 volumes of poetry, including Second Nature, Free Speech, Green Leaves, Even for the West, Lāhaina Noon, and $1 Million Bill. More than 650 poems have been published in 300 national venues, including North American Review, Slate, The Sun Magazine, and Ploughshares, and in international reviews in Australia, Canada, United States, New Zealand, the Netherlands, Nicaragua, and Japan. Sheffer lives in Hawaii, which is really fantastic, actually. And so before we go, thank you so much for the interview. Before you go, do you want to give any shout outs? Shout outs mean to anyone, any organization, anything you have coming up. Do you want to give any shout outs?
Let's see. Um, I am, I've just finished a few hours ago an interview with Dr. Andy Jones, who has a poetry and technology hour on KDVS, which is at Davis, California. And that should be up soon on their website. I just had a poem published in the Sun magazine, which has been on my radar for many years because it's just an amazing venue for writing poems and publishing poems. So I've been really glad that they took one of mine, and they utterly astounded me by putting it on 2 pages all by itself, just the poem in a 2 page spread. I was amazed that they did that. And let's see what else. I had just published a little craft piece on the North American Review website. They have a place called Open Space, and I wrote a piece about where people might want to break lines, line breaks basically, in their poems, and why certain words are better than others to end on. So if anybody wants to go to North American Review, Open Space, look up Eric Paul Shaffer, and you should be able to find that piece. And I have a couple of other pieces in there somewhere, but I haven't been able to find them. Maybe you can find them.
All right, cool. It's actually been a really fascinating conversation. So thanks again for joining me. And that's it, actually. And so, again, Eric Paul Schaefer, thank you so much for joining me. I'm going to start recording right now.